Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Molten Truth. And right on cue, the camera came on, and one of my cats just decided to pop in for a visit. This is the lesser known Dawn of the team of Orlando and Dawn. And yes, that is not a coincidence. I do enjoy the musical stylings of Tony, Orlando, and Dawn. There you go. So, welcome to the Molten Truth. This is our episode. This is our second season. We're coming close to the end of my second season, and we get to talk with a fellow author. I believe you're a fellow author
hmm
by the name
hmm
of Mark Morton. And this is a fellow I've had to try to track down because he also has another person with a similar name who does not. Well, I guess he actually, in hindsight, the other Mark Morton has written a book,
Yep.
but he's more known for his musical stylings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this Mark Morton, welcome, and we look
Thank
forward
you.
to getting to
Thank you
know
so
more
much.
about you.
And I like the cat walking across. I actually have a cup right here that says Fur Mama because we don't have cats, but our fur animals are dogs. We've got 4 dogs,
So, well, they're
and you
members of
might
the
hear them.
family, right?
We love animals. Yeah, yeah. So I'm really glad to be here, and I think the premise of your podcast is really really good, and the title as well, the Molten Truth.
Thank
Sort
you.
of getting down to how people got through adversity. And I don't think, I think that would be true of me and my family, but it's probably true of everybody, in some way or another, or it will be at some point in people's lives. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great premise, I think.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It took a little while to get
Yeah.
down to that, but once I came up with that thought, I thought, yes, this is what we're going to run with.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want me to start off by giving you some context about me and
We would
then,
love, yeah. Let's find out,
okay.
who is Mark Morton. What is he about? We know you're
Okay.
Canadian.
Well, yes, this is Mark Morton. I'm in Canada. I'm about an hour outside of Toronto, in a city called Kitchener-Waterloo. It's
Okay.
one of those cities, where there's two side by side. But I'm not from here. I grew up in Saskatchewan, in Canada. Saskatchewan is, your listeners will probably know, is north of North Dakota,
Okay.
and part of Montana as well. And the prairies, very, very, very flat and very cold in the winter, and it can get very hot in the summer, like from minus 40. Well, okay, can't think of it in Fahrenheit. Actually, minus 40 in Celsius is the same as in Fahrenheit. I think that's where they cross. Anyways, it gets very, very hot. Minus 40 in the winter, and probably up to about 100 Fahrenheit in the summer.
Wow.
So it's a place of extremes.
Is it because of the high
Uh,
elevation? Because in my head, the geography you're talking about is connected with the Rockies, and if you're not in the mountains, I figure you must be on a very high plateau.
No, no, we're not. Alberta, our neighbor province, is just like that. But you go from the Rocky Mountains to the foothills of Alberta, and then halfway through Alberta on the way to Saskatchewan, it gets very, very low and flat. Um, and I think it's just, why does it get so hot there? I don't know. It is a kind of weird thing.
There's a whole other
But
podcast in
yeah,
there, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's where I grew up. And even when I was a little kid, like when I was 4 or 5, my mom said that I wanted to learn how to read, and I learned how to read pretty early. I loved reading. I also loved language. And I was growing up on a small, poor farm, grain farm, and we didn't have access to a lot of books, but we did have an old dictionary, probably like from the 1930s or something. And in the back of it, it had an appendix that had, Latin phrases, Latin mottos, and things like that. And so I remember when I was 6, like memorizing these Latin mottos because I just couldn't get enough about language. Something in me, I was just built into me about language. So that's what I pursued as I got older. Eventually did a PhD in 16th century literature at the University of Toronto. And then from there, taught in France for a while, and then eventually got a job at the University of Winnipeg in Manitoba. Winnipeg is pretty much the geographic center of North America. So it's about as far as you can be from any ocean.
Okay.
And I lived there for 12 years, and that's where I started writing books. And my first 4 books were all nonfiction, and they all pertain to either language or history or culture. Like one of them, the first one was it's called Cupboard Love, and a dictionary of culinary curiosities, and it's about where words about food and cooking, where they came from and how they changed over history,
You are
things like
talking
that.
my
And there's about a
language.
thousand.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I couldn't get away from language.
Words and
Yeah,
food.
and then another one, I sort of did a sister book to that one a few years later, which was called The Lover's Tongue, a merry romp through the language of love and sex. And it looked at the origins and histories of words about love and sex. Then I did another one with a friend, a co-author, which was about 16th century food culture. In other words, what people ate during Shakespeare's time and how they prepared it, things like that. And it's quite same in many ways, quite similar in many ways, but very different in other ways. Like they ate sparrows, they ate all kinds of little tiny birds that we never would. And they had ways of catching them. You know, you'd say, how could you catch a little bird like that? And what they would do is they would take um, like pitch or sap from a like a pine tree, and they would spread it all over branches, really really sticky stuff. Little birds would come and settle on the branches, and they couldn't get away. And so the next day people would come along and pluck the little sparrows off the branches like apples. So that's how they caught them. What was the other book? Oh yeah, the other book that I wrote was about how people at the ends of previous centuries, celebrated or wrote about the end of their centuries. And of course, that one came out in 1999, when everybody was talking about Y2K and things like that. Whoops. And yeah, that was interesting to research too, because I guess anytime I look at history, what I always find is in so many ways, those people from centuries ago or however long ago, they are so like us in so many ways and so different from us in other ways that it's just kind of fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I did. Oh, and then, and this will come into when I start talking about the molten truth aspect of what we're going to be talking about. Then I stopped writing nonfiction. Well, I stopped writing entirely for about 17 years because my wife and I adopted four older children. And as everybody knows, I think, when children are adopted at older ages, that's because they've suffered all kinds of awful things. And
A lot of
so they
trauma.
usually have PTSD and other things. And so they needed our 100% attention, our full support for 17 years until they got to be the great young people that they are and independent. And so then I started thinking, well, maybe I should write another book, but I didn't want to write nonfiction anymore. And that was partly because, having raised these kids and read so many books, I don't know how many times we read the Harry Potter, books, things like that. Because four kids reading Harry Potter to each one of them, times all those books. So I wanted to write something that drew on my imagination. But the other thing was, as I was older, I was a lot older by then, and my memory just wasn't what it used to be. And so I couldn't retain all those facts that I needed to in order to write a nonfiction book. It just would have been too challenging. So I switched to writing fiction, and I wrote a novel, a dystopian young adult novel called The Headmasters. And actually, just a couple months ago, it won a national award in Canada, um, called the Arlene Barlin Award for Science Fiction and Fantasy. So that was very affirming. I really, really was glad to get that affirmation. And now I've finished another manuscript, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. And that's where we are. And I can jump into the sort of the challenges that I had to overcome if you want, or if you want to ask any questions about the
Yeah.
stuff I've said so far.
Yeah.
I'll take a drink of coffee.
Sounds good. I mean, that was quite a lot and fascinating. I'm wondering because of your, I don't know how to word this right, but you seem to have a very intense interest in the etymology of languages and talking about, like the origin of foods and such. So,
Yep. Yep.
are you a teacher or what's your background that plays into this.
Yeah. Yeah. After I finished my PhD at the University of Toronto, I taught. I guess the longest I taught was at the University of Winnipeg. I was there for about 12 years, and then my wife is from Kitchener Waterloo, where I am now, and we thought, well, maybe we should move closer to her parents. And so a job came up at the University of Waterloo, and it was in a teaching center. So I switched from teaching to teaching instructors how to teach more effectively. As you know, I had about 30 colleagues or so who did the same thing. I say had because just as of January 1st, I retired. I thought I want to write full time now, so I retired. Still getting used to that. So yeah, I switched from teaching students to teaching instructors, and it was really rewarding. But yeah, it wasn't my passion. Writing fiction now is my passion.
Well, I
Yeah.
understand that passion. I'm right there with you. I would love to have the ability to do that full time instead of doing a full time
Yeah.
job and doing everything else on the
Uh-huh.
side. But,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
maybe
For
someday.
sure. Oh yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, yeah. When you're passionate about
Yep.
something, you usually do find a way to make that work. But
Exactly. You can't ignore it, and you can't leave it for too long. I think if anything, I maybe left it for a bit too long, but got to work with what life hands you.
it's so
You know.
true.
So
Well, and it sounds like you put your
yep.
family first, especially once you adopted these,
Hmm.
you said four children. Were they all
Yep.
four from the same
14.
family, or were they four
No,
separate?
two siblings and two siblings. They were from. So we first we adopted uh, two kids, Brandon and Leica. Brandon was about 10, Leica was about 8, and then a few years after that, we adopted another pair. They're twins, actually, fraternal twins, Roxana and Matthew, and they were, I think, 7 when we adopted them. So we became this big blended, found, built. Maybe built is the best word, best way of describing it. And our dogs. And I mention our dogs again because they were so crucial in our adoption process. Because they're loving. Oh, I get goosebumps whenever I think about them. And each child sort of adopted one of our dogs, and our dogs kind of adopted them. They were just so integral to the whole adoption process. We're really, really lucky to have them. And, as they've gotten older, they've passed away, but we've always replaced one, or something has come up where we've ended up with another one. So we've had 4 sort of for all of our lives, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine
Yeah.
how the dogs
So,
would have helped ease like that whole bonding process. I would think that,
yeah. Yeah.
having animals around is so healing, just regardless of what the family structure is. There's something
Yeah.
healing about
Yeah.
having a pet that act of, just touching that fur and interacting with them
Hmm.
feeds something in a person's
Totally.
soul. So coming from a traumatic
Totally. Totally.
situation or just even troublesome situation, I can see where
Yep.
that would help
Yep.
ease a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I love
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. It's all
No, I was
right.
just saying, with regard to PTSD, the trauma, but often kids who get adopted at older ages, they also have, something called attachment disorder, where they're afraid to make attachments, right? And they helped with that too. Um, and I'm hoping our youngest daughter, 6 months ago, I guess, got a job as a recreation coordinator at a um, kind of a hospital, a long-term care home, I guess. And I've asked her, and I think we're going to be able to make this happen, to be able to take one of our dogs to visit the elderly people there, because everybody, almost everybody, loves dogs, and I think that's so healthy for elderly people to be able to interact with dogs, because they probably all had dogs themselves that they remember. So I'm looking forward to
Absolutely.
that.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
also love the way you use the word, how you built your family. It's very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
You made a
Mm-hmm.
choice, and I
Mm-hmm.
love that you made the unselfish
Yeah.
choice to adopt siblings. So
Mm-hmm.
often
Mm-hmm.
you hear, at least in the media or in movies, where siblings are separated, which
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
adds to trauma that's already there. So I love that
absolutely. Yeah,
you
yeah.
adopted them together. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
comment on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, built is, I think, a good word because, like you say, it had to be very intentional, very deliberate. Um, Not just with regard to my wife and I and our four kids, but sort of our whole community. The church that we go to, we're Mennonites. I think you're in Ohio, right? So you probably know
Mhm.
what
Yeah.
Mennonites are, or
Well, and even in
Pennsylvania rather, is where
Texas,
there's a
where
lot of
I was raised, there was a
in
Mennonite
Texas. I didn't
community.
know that.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I claim
yeah.
Texas is kind of
So
home.
that yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you mentioned that to me before. Um, yeah. So that Mennonite church was really important, and then my wife's father and mother and extended family, and it was really important to kind of put all those pieces into place. Um, and I, yeah, all of that I was so grateful for. The biggest, like, if I'm thinking about the challenges that we had to overcome in that whole adoption and raising kids process, there's different ones. Probably the first one. Well, actually, there's one. The very first one is when you decide that you want to adopt kids. And I think my wife and I always wanted to adopt kids. My own parents adopted three kids, and they fostered about another 70 over the course of 40 years.
Amazing.
And so when we were looking into adoption, the adoption workers will say, well, we've got these children in mind, still there's some process that has to happen and things like that. And so it's like you're hoping, that this is going to happen, but then sometimes it doesn't. Things change and the kids end up not being available for adoption, which I suppose in many ways is a good thing because it means the birth parents have got things sorted out and they can go back to them. But still, there's a lot of sort of tentativeness about that, and you feel like you're on holding your breath for sometimes months at a time. So that was a challenge. And then after we adopted them, like as I was mentioning, helping them with all the PTSD and attachment disorders and things like that, just exhausting. We've never been so tired in our lives, and that was sometimes hard on our own relationship because you work with the kids, you're supporting the kids throughout the day, and then finally they go to bed, and it's like, okay, we're both exhausted. We need to go to sleep. But we managed to get through that again, in great part because of extended family who would take the kids sometimes for a few days or a weekend. Um, then another issue that came in there was birth family, and as I mentioned, our kids, especially with the twins, whom we adopted at last. Um, some of their birth family were in the same city that we are in, and were not in a good place, but it's hard to talk about because their kids were taken from them, seized by the courts because the birth mom had other issues going on that prevented her from looking after them. Um, but then the birth family continued to try to insert themselves into our family, and that can work out sometimes, if depending on why the kids had to leave their birth family. But in this case, it was not a good thing, and that led to so many challenges and so many. Well, I'll give you an example. Um, Shortly after our twins moved in, um, we learned that their birth mom, just by coincidence, had moved into a boarding house sort of just down the street and around the corner. It wasn't like she planned on doing that. She didn't know, but we knew. And so that meant that whenever we got home, we just had to kind of bundle the kids or bustle the kids into the house. They'd want to work outside or play outside. And we'd say, oh, wait, let's not play outside right now because they didn't know that their birth mom was there. There were so many things like that that made that we had to navigate. We had to navigate, and that we didn't, the kids didn't come with a manual of what to do in situations, just like birth
Wouldn't it be
children
nice if they did?
do. Yeah, yeah, how to. Um, and But we figured that out. Eventually, it all worked out, and all of our kids had ultimately decided on different arrangements with their birth family. So two of them didn't want to have anything to do with them, even when they became adults. One of them did and went to visit them in Newfoundland for a few months, probably almost a year. Um, and his sibling didn't want to have anything to do with them. So everybody sort of found their own way. Um, yeah, and then as they got older, trying to figure out what, and I think this is true of any child maybe, but I think it's especially true of adopted kids, trying to figure out how hard you need to push them and how hard you need to support them, you know, um, because you want to challenge them, but at the same time, you don't want to challenge them too much because they can be more precarious, more brittle, sort of. Um, and then navigating our way through the school system, like I would say that all of the actual teachers in the classroom that we encountered with all four of our kids were amazing, just amazing. But at the administrative level at schools, oh, we had so many battles that we had to make, um, and my wife Melanie and I are lucky because we're both capable people. We both had jobs where wasn't working in a factory or something like that, so I could take time off if I needed to go to a meeting with somebody, whether it's a medical practitioner or a school superintendent or whatever. And that wouldn't be true. That isn't true for so many other birth parents, adoptive parents or birth parents, um, who they're trying to navigate the school system and maybe they don't have English as a first language, or they're they're maybe just not as assertive as Melanie and I could be. We used to joke that when we would go into a meeting, she would play bad cop and I would play batter cop.
You guys
Because
meant
sometimes we had to
business.
push so hard. Yeah, we meant business. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We got a reputation, I think. Um, but yeah, we got through that. All of our kids are doing well. They've all come along. I mean, I guess the challenge now is, and again, this is true of all parents, I think. Um, when do you let go? When do you kind of stop not worrying about them? Or, like again, I'll give an example. My youngest daughter, over I guess on Saturday, yeah, just yesterday, um, decided that she wanted to drive from Kitchener Waterloo, where we are, to Hamilton, which is a city about an hour away. And the main way of getting there is along the 401, which is like a super highway. It's like 6 lanes on each side, big trucks. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so worried, because I get freaked out when I'm driving it. But you got to do it sometime. And I guess you just have to tell yourself, well, just got to let things go. Likely it will all turn out well. And if you hold on to them too tightly, well, then a different kind of problem will arise. They'll never
Exactly.
rise to the occasion, so to speak.
Or they may go off the other
Yeah.
way, like a spring. You hold it for so long when you
Yes.
with that pressure, it can go like crazy.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes that did happen in some ways with our kids and ourselves. Um, yeah. And then I was mentioning earlier on, I mean, I'm just sort of talking about hopping back and forth about different challenges. One kind of weird challenge, and it's small, but it's just kind of, I'll mention it because it's kind of an odd one, is I have something called prosopagnosia, which is harmless. It's better known as face blindness. So I don't remember faces. I don't recognize faces. Like you and I could talk for 3 hours, and then if I ran into you the next day, I wouldn't recognize you unless I heard your voice. I would recognize your voice. Um,
Okay, that's
so
interesting.
it I mean, I'm not out and about as much now that I've retired, but when I was working, oh, it caused embarrassing situations. Every week, at least one embarrassing situation where I'd walk by one of my colleagues or walk by with an instructor that I had been doing a workshop with the day before. So just had to get used to that. And I would tend to tell people about this. And yeah, like I say, it's completely harmless. I like to think that, that part of my brain that in most people recognizes faces, that it's been devoted to language or writing or something like that. It's we only have so much brain, and you can't do everything. So
Yeah. So I'm
yeah.
hearing this and I'm thinking, okay, so then how did
Mhm.
that work when you were dating your wife? Like when you first met her?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question, because when I first saw her, I thought, oh, she is so beautiful. And actually, she became aware of me not by my physical appearance, but through my voice. Because when I was living in Winnipeg, I had this weekly little segment on CBC radio where I would talk about, you guess it, word origins. And so she had heard my voice on CBC radio, and she liked my voice. And then eventually we met up at some sort of literary event. And yeah, I thought she was really, really beautiful. But then when we parted, she went away for the evening or wherever. I couldn't recall what she looked like. I knew that I'd found her really beautiful. This was still early enough in the internet days that I couldn't find a photograph of her. And so it was probably about 3 months before I could really pull her face, her features into my mind.
Okay.
Um, but some of the people that I worked with some people for 20 years. And even now, when I try to get their face into my mind, I just can't. It's hard to describe. It's just like this absence, sort of.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that made things a little awkward at first, not being able to recognize the person that you've been dating for 3 months.
I'm guessing that you must have
Yeah,
told her about this early on so she wouldn't take
yeah,
offense.
yeah, yeah. Although I guess I met her when I was in my 30s, but it wasn't till I was in my early 20s that I realized that I had this harmless condition. And that was because I went to university and I started going to many more movies. I love film. And I discovered that other people weren't having the same difficulty as I was recognizing characters. A character would go off the screen, come back, a few minutes later wearing something else. And I'd say, who's that? Is that um, whoever, Leonardo DiCaprio? So that's what made me think about it. And a neuropsychologist, yeah, confirmed that as well. He said the convolutions of my brain are a variant of normal, whatever that means. But that's probably true of lots of people.
Or just in different
Yeah,
ways.
and then different way, yeah, as we all do. Yeah, we're. I think in a way we could say we're all neuro atypical, or we're all neuro unique because there's nobody else like us. Um, Something else, I guess, that it's taken me a while to get used to, and it's felt like a challenge, was as I was getting older, as I was saying earlier, discovering that my memory was not what it used to be. I used to be able to remember so many things all at once. Um, and it changed. So I can't remember that so many things all at once. And uh, it's very common, where you're trying to remember something and you say, hand me that, what do you call it? What do you call it? That spoon, it's like, and it's always the most common words that you can't remember. You just can't pull them into your memory. That can be frustrating. But I think in other ways, it's allowed my memory or allowed my mind to do other things, because instead of kind of being obsessed with words and word origins, it felt like I could draw upon my imagination more. Um, it sort of freed that up. And I think that was sort of a blessing, because that's what I wanted to move forward to. Because when you're writing a novel, I guess you got to remember your own plot, but you don't have to remember thousands of facts and things like that. So yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place, but at the same time, both my wife and I are both still sort of going, whew, that was a very intense 20 years with our kids. Yeah, still kind of catching our breath, I guess.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So all the kids are
Yeah.
grown up at this point.
Yep, yep. The youngest are the twins are 22.
Oh, okay.
Brandon just
Okay.
turns 30, and Leica is 29. Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, all grown, successful
yeah.
projects
Yep,
completed. Um,
that's
so
right. Mission completed.
exactly. I'm a little curious, going back to this idea of not being able to visualize faces, because when I'm writing stories, very often I've got a very clear picture of what my characters look like. So,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
about you, for you and your imagination as you're writing your fictional stories now? Do you visualize your
yeah, yeah.
characters at all? And how do you do as far as remembering how they look to you?
Yep. Yep. Well, when I started writing The Headmasters, my first novel, what I did is I sort of had a list of the main characters. I didn't quite know how the story was going to go, but I knew who the main characters would be. And I just searched for photographs on the internet of strangers, basically, until I found somebody like the main character. Her name is Maple. And I finally came across a young woman. She's in the novel. She's about 12 when the novel starts and about 20 when it ends. And I said, that's Maple. That's what Maple looks like. And I did that for every character. And I would keep going back to them. And that, I mean, one thing that would keep me on track, so that I wasn't saying Maple had blue eyes in one scene and brown eyes in another, things like that. But it's like we can all read each other's stories to some extent in each other's faces. I think there's that song. What's it called? The Story. Who's that by? Anyways, it's about how the story of her life is written in her face, and I think that's very true. So yeah, I did things like that, and I guess I was able to picture them, but I've discovered not to the same degree that other people can picture things. Like I did this with I came across this a couple of months ago in the New York Times, I think, how different people have not just the ability to see or remember or not remember faces, but other things. So they had this little test that you could take, and one of the things was, imagine an apple on a table and then write down what it looks like. And some people, it's just like they're imagining a concept. And that's what I was like. It was like I wasn't really seeing an apple. I was seeing the idea of an apple. But other people that I did this with, they could describe in great detail what color it was, where it was sitting on a table, how the light, what the shadow was like, things like that. I mean, there's so much about our minds that we don't know.
Absolutely. And hearing you talk about that reminds me of a conversation I had last summer with one of my cousins. She was
Hmm.
talking about how when people would say describe a picture, how some people have the ability to fully visualize and see what's being talked about,
Yeah.
but she did not
Yeah.
have that ability. She could,
Yep.
when
Yep.
she was doing that, it was more like you were saying, the concept. She couldn't actually
Hmm.
visualize it, but she could understand the concept. And that was very
Yep.
interesting to me to hear
Yep.
that for the first time. And then, of
Hmm.
course, it started me on this whole
Hmm.
trajectory of, could I actually see it, or was I imagining I could see it? It's kind of a conversation in my head.
Right.
But
Right.
that
Right.
was fascinating to
Yeah.
learn that was a
Yeah.
problem that she had, and I had no idea
Yeah.
that there was even
Yeah.
that thought
And there are
process out
super
there.
visualizers. Like there are some people who have that ability to a great degree, like
Mhm.
architects, of course, would have that.
Yes.
I remember working with a chemistry instructor some years ago, and he had this. So he had the ability to see in his mind a molecule, a complex molecule, and rotate it and look at it from different sides. Obviously that's why he was a great chemistry professor. Yeah.
can't even imagine that degree. And part of me is kind of grateful for that because I work
Hmm.
my day jobs in the medical world, and sometimes the things people describe are visual enough for me to go, stop.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
gonna make me
yeah,
sick too. But oh my
yep,
goodness,
yep.
that
Well,
degree
that
of
that makes
visualization.
that ability. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of something that we told our kids as they were growing up. Of course, everybody has access to the internet, and there's awful things on there, and awful things on the news. And we would say to them, you can't unsee something. So be very careful what you allow yourself to see, because you might see something and it might haunt you for the rest of your life. And sadly, that happens by accident sometimes when somebody is driving and they come across a car accident and they have to help, but it traumatizes them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
really, I love that advice that you gave them because it's so true. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
choosing to see something harmful is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, yeah, like that. When Charlie Kirk was shot, I mean, that was captured on cell phones, and of course, it was on the internet. And I know that a lot of people looked at it. I didn't. Um, yeah, it's just
Or
some things you don't want to see.
exactly. Or even back when 911 happened,
Hmm.
people in other countries, more especially, they got the unedited footage of what
Yeah,
happened. And
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
I've seen some of that footage enough to go, yeah, I really
Hmm.
wish I had not seen that. So I can't
Yeah,
even imagine the people
yeah,
there in
yeah,
person who witnessed the horrors of that day.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I
choosing
mean,
what to see.
humans are resilient. Yeah,
Yeah.
humans are resilient for the most part, I think. And in fact, um, I guess I'll say this more explicitly. Our four kids, they all were so resilient because they overcame the challenges and things that life had handed them. And it was actually that example of their resilience that I kind of was the inspiration of my first novel. Maple, the main character, is kind of a fusion of all four of our kids,
Okay.
in my mind. And she is an extremely resilient, stubborn young person. And that is the gift that allows her to ultimately take on these other alien creatures that have taken over her community. So yeah, I guess something I've learned is that you don't know what life is going to hand you. I keep using that expression, but what we can do, and this goes back to Marcus Aurelius, an ancient Roman uh, emperor, who said, "What we can control our reaction to things." And I also would go further, and I would say that in most things, there's either something good to be found, or something that will expand us as a person. I
A
think.
lesson to be learned.
Yeah, 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 and that has a lot to do with how we frame things. I think uh, it's easy to get down, you know, and the world has always been, full of challenges, and we don't know what it was like to live through the Black Plague or the First World War. But still, things that are going on in the world now, they're pretty heavy. And I know lots of people that are really struggling with trying to process it all.
These are tough
Yeah.
times, and in some ways, you're right. There were some really serious hard times during the wars, the world wars, during Black Plague.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I feel like in some respects, today's world is, if not as difficult, I'm going to word this
Hmm.
wrong. It feels more difficult. It feels like you see and hear more people struggling today than maybe
Hmm.
we've heard. And maybe it's because we're being more communicative. Maybe that's the difference. But you hear
Yeah.
more people
Yeah.
suffering depression, so more of the anxieties, younger people taking things into their hands. And maybe it's because I'm in the medical world. I don't know that. But
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
feels like these times are either more challenging or we're just more vocal
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, and I think they're more challenging because they're more complicated. I think. I mean, I'm not an expert, but if I imagine, let's say, the life of a peasant in 16th century England, it's a pretty straightforward life. You go out and you put your seed in, and you look after your horses and your oxen and things like that. But you don't have. It's almost like there was so much out of their control. Whether they got sick or cancer or whatever, that couldn't really worry about that. And now we have such complicated lives, so many things that we either think we need to be juggling, or we're expected to juggle. Yeah, it feels like a lot of pressure. And then when things like AI come along, which I don't know where that's going to go. It's just such a big uncertainty. I'm pretty sure it's going to go in one of two directions. It's either going to be a really great thing for us,
Really bad.
or it's going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator.
Right. It really could go either way. Um,
Yeah,
and from the
it,
energy
it's going to
that
be a
it
different world.
absorbs too. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
although I
yeah.
did see something when I was scrolling through Facebook last night that I was like, oh, well, that might be one beneficial thing. And I think it's over
Hmm.
in Denmark that they're using all the energy and the heat that's comes as a
Yeah,
byproduct to actually
yeah.
heat neighborhoods. And I thought, well, that's one way
Right.
of taking something
That's
potentially
brilliant.
negative and turning it into a positive.
Yeah,
So I thought
yeah,
that was
yeah.
really
Because I
smart.
mean, the heat that's given off is energy. You capture that and divert it to somewhere else. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Those Scandinavians, they always think of things.
Exactly. Now, if they could just do that underneath the roadways, like keep the pavement always warm where you didn't have to worry about the snow or an ice on the road.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, can we
yeah.
build
There's
road
always,
tunnels?
yeah, yeah. And I have heard that already. AI has helped scientists or researchers like identify some new proteins or molecules of drugs that can be helpful. Um, I mean, even if it can do that, though, it's hard to know, is that going to be available to everybody in the world? Or is it just going to be the 1% or the 100th of 1% that gets access to those things? Is it going to create bigger discrepancy or disparity between people on Earth? I don't know. It's going to be a different world for our kids and grandkids.
It's true.
Yeah.
The only concern I would really have, you know, I've used it on a low level. It's a great sounding board if I have questions about something, or I have a project like I want to tweak a recipe and I want to do. I found it very helpful for feedback, even when I'm brainstorming about storylines. The problem is when technology becomes a crutch. I love my phone.
Hmm.
I love having a cell phone. I
Hmm.
love having the numbers programmed in. But now and again, I purposely try to dial a number from memory because I grew up in a generation where we didn't have the cell phones and you did have to have things memorized. I worry that people, when they use things as a crutch, when they need information and they're so reliant on that technology, what happens if you don't have that technology? Now you can't phone
Yeah.
someone important that you need to reach.
Yeah.
So that's for
Exactly.
me the
Exactly.
danger. That's what I worry
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to, I think as long as we can as individuals, we have to keep challenging our brains, our minds. If we don't, I think we quickly go downhill. I've seen that happen with lots of elderly people, like my grandmother, for instance. Eventually, she became uh, so physically frail that she had to go into a nursing home, but her mind was still good. But when you take somebody out of their own house and the rhythms of life that they've had, yeah, they just quickly lose track of what season it is and things like that. Yeah, but I think they're doing better now in nursing homes than they used to, in
That's
terms of
good.
keeping people stimulated. Yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
a family member of mine made a point to me in reference to someone he knew whose mental abilities were in decline because of age, and onset, of potential dementia, and how
Hmm.
much kinder it is, even though they don't want to change. They're comfortable in their home.
Hmm.
The time to
Hmm.
move is before it becomes a problem, so that those new surroundings can be familiar, and then it's an easier transition.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, because
Yeah.
we get attached, we like what we like,
Yeah.
but in the long
Yeah. Yeah.
run, it's healthier.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
and I
It's a
could
real
talk for
catch
ages
22.
about this.
Oh, I think we could. I mean, I'm sure we could. Because each topic sort of can lead to 10 other topics. Like in here in Canada, I guess maybe starting about 5 or 8 years ago, medically assisted deaths were made legal. Lots and lots and lots of conditions, but that certainly was a big change. Yeah, and it raises all kinds of issues. Like, at what point do you draw the line? Oh, I got one pup
Yes, I heard the
whining.
dog. Thankfully, mine is behaving himself so far.
Yeah, there's so much to process. Life is happening more quickly, I think. Like, my grandmother was born in 1898, which I think was like 12 years before the Wright brothers, flew the first airplane. She came over on a steamer from England. It took 3 weeks. She landed in Halifax in Canada, took another boat down to Montreal, and then got on a train and took the train as far west as it had been built, which was the prairies, and got off. And her father was supposed to be there. He wasn't. he had he had left. He had somehow gone further west. So there she was at age 14, um, in the middle of nowhere, and she had to figure out how to survive. It's just astonishing. Yeah.
Amazing. And people did it. They found a way.
Yep. Yep.
It's amazing what they were able to do. So, as we're getting
Mm-hmm.
close
Mm-hmm.
to the end of our program,
Mm-hmm.
a couple things. First of all, do you have a
Mm-hmm.
website?
Yeah, my website is www. I guess that's taken for granted. My name, Mark Morton, MarkMorton, and then it's .ca because I'm in
.ca for
Canada, not
Canada.
.com. .ca.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's information about my books there and things like that. Yeah, that's the main way if people want to find out more about my books.
Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
And what's the most recent book, either that you've just put out or that you're about to put out, or both?
yeah. Well, it's sort of I'll give you a trick answer because the very first book that I wrote 30 years ago was republished about 5 months ago. So it's both the first, the oldest, and the newest. That's the Cupboard Love book, the one about the origins of food words. And then the novel, The Headmasters, came out about a year ago or so. Yeah, yeah. And hopefully there'll be another one that I'll have out soon. We'll see.
Sounds good. We look forward to that. Okay, so now this is the part of the program where you get the random question that was left by the previous guest, and then you
Oh,
get
right,
to leave
right.
yours for the next person.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, my last guest asked this question, and he gave a little background first.
Hmm.
He and some coworkers were watching the TV program The Walking Dead, and then they would get to
Oh, yeah,
work and
yeah.
they would discuss, about how stupid the episodes had been. So they called themselves the Mocking Dead. Um,
That's right. That's
so then
good.
his question with this background here is, what would be your strategy for surviving a zombie apocalypse?
I have thought about this. I have the perfect answer. In a way, I wouldn't even have to do anything, and probably neither would you in Ohio. But let's say further down, like I think The Walking Dead takes place around Atlanta or something like that. What they should have done? They should have started heading north because you get far enough where the winters are going to be cold, the zombies freeze, and then you just go out and poke them in the head or whatever. So that would be my strategy. Would be would be go up towards the Arctic, and then eventually, it'll be safe to head back, I think. So yeah, I could never understand why they stayed down there in the southern states, just head north.
Gotta have something to feed a story, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
what I always told myself. I'm
that's
like,
what I
this
would
is
do.
stupid, but this is how the story continues. Okay, well, we'll buy it.
Yep, 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 yep. Yeah, otherwise there'd be no plot. Yeah,
Exactly. But if you poke holes into it, then there's no story. It's like poking holes in a life raft. Well, there we go. We're
exactly.
sinking.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Now, so you want a question for me about to give to your next guest?
Yep, it can be
Well,
absolutely
I
anything.
okay. This is what it would be, or this is what it is. Um, if you could go back and visit a city at some time in the past, a century ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, what would it be and why? So, what city in the past would you like to visit? Like for me, it would be Paris. I would love to see Paris, like in the 1800s.
This question, it's fuel for the imagination. I could see someone taking
Hmm.
that, running with it, and making a book. That is a
Yep,
great question. I appreciate that. Great one for the next guest, whoever they may
my
be.
pleasure.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience before we sign off of this episode?
Mm, no, just everybody keep hanging in there. You know, it's not always going to be this challenging, I think. I hope.
There we go. Exactly. If nothing else, a positive attitude will get us through. So,
Yep, yep,
when in doubt,
yep.
just
Well,
find
thank you,
something to be
Zoe.
positive about.
Yeah, yeah. Really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you. Nice getting a chance to introduce you to our audience, and maybe we'll talk to you if you do end up releasing another book. We'll talk,
Yeah,
have
I
another
hope so.
conversation down the line.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to. I'd really like that.
sounds good. We'll stick
Okay.
around and then we'll talk after we end the episode. Thank you so much for joining us on the Molten Truth. We hope you enjoyed our show. Please share, like, follow, and keep in mind the new broadcast that's just recently been released, still under the Molten Truth umbrella. It's Behind the Diagnosis: Famous Lives Untold. By now, there's at least 3 episodes out, possibly more, and be sure to check those out. Thank you for joining us. Okay, I think it stopped recording.